Welcome back. We talked about the impact on the mother, the father, the siblings, as well as on the grandparents. Plus we talked about the change of the family's existence and the disability and the stigma attached to it. We talked about the possible role of the teachers in dealing with the children with autism spectrum disorders. Plus we talked about the role of the early intervention, rehabilitative measures and intervention measures. So let's ask, as we talked about these intervention measures and these counseling, what probably the suitable measures that we can follow or a family can follow?
I think before we go on, I think it's very important also to talk about family therapy and counseling. When we've just spoken about the role of the educational community in helping to find a child suitable placements, create an environment wherein the child can be properly educated. An equally important aspect is family therapy and counseling, which includes fostering positive coping, information, giving success stories to empower families, encouraging self-development activities, especially for mothers, addressing the needs of siblings, grandparents and other family members, and preparing for the future. Let's elaborate this a little bit. We've constantly stressed the difficulties involved in having a child with autism. But one of the very important things that any counselor or any family therapist or anybody who is working with children with disability in their families needs to do is also foster positive coping. बच्चा ऑटिस्टिक बाद में है, लेकिन पहले वो आपका बच्चा है और उस बच्चे से जो आपको आनंद मिल सकता है, उस बच्चे की परवरिश में जो एक सेटिस्फैक्शन होता है, उस बच्चे के छोटे छोटे माइलस्टोन्स में आपको जो खुशी होती है, हो सकता है वो बच्चा आईआईटी का एग्जाम क्रैक नहीं करेगा, लेकिन जिस दिन मेरा बच्चा सफलतापूर्वक एक दुकान में जाके अपने लिए कोई चीज खरीद लेगा, उस चीज में भी बहुत ज्यादा सेटिस्फैक्शन एक पेरेंट को मिल सकता है. और इन चीजों को एंजॉय करना, इन चीजों का एक सेटिस्फैक्शन लेना और अपने बच्चे के साथ एक रैपोर्ट बनाना, एक रिलेशनशिप सस्टेन करना, ये भी बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट चीजें हैं. हम देखते हैं कि जब हम परिवारों के साथ बात करते हैं, we may talk about the difficulties families are facing, but when you actually talk to families, you will be amazed at the amount of unconditional acceptance many of them have for their children. और इसका कोई ताल्लुक वेल्थ या एजुकेशन या किसी चीज से नहीं होता है. मैं कई बार देख चुकी हूँ कि बहुत ही हम्बल बैकग्राउंड में जो लोग रह रहे हैं, बहुत ही निम्न रिसोर्सेज वाले हैं, जो बहुत हाई फाई नहीं है जिसे हम कहते हैं, या बहुत मतलब अच्छे सर्विसेज में नहीं है, लेकिन फिर भी उनके अपने बच्चों के प्रति इतनी अधिक फीलिंग होती है, इतनी अधिक ममता होती है कि वो देख के कभी कभी हम सो कॉल्ड पढ़े लिखे लोग भी शर्मिंदा फील करते हैं कि इतनी ज्यादा अनकंडीशनल एक्सेप्टेंस इन लोगों में है. तो मतलब there is hope that children are going to be very well looked after, very much loved, very deeply loved by their families. So this attitude of positive coping, of accepting the child, this is a very, very important goal of any family therapy. Also, like I said, giving success stories. There are a number of stories. It's not just that having a child with disability is something so terrible कि आपकी जिंदगी बस अब खत्म हो गई. कई परिवार है जो बहुत बढ़िया से कोप करते हैं, बहुत अच्छी तरह से बच्चा डेवलप कर रहा है. वो सक्सेस स्टोरीज देख के हौसला अफजाई एक परिवार का करना, ये भी एक फैमिली थेरेपिस्ट के लिए बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट जिम्मेदारी है. एंड लाइक वी हैव मेंशन्ड अर्लियर, addressing the needs or addressing the issues of all the family members, whether it is the mother, the father, the siblings, the grandparents. Each of them, as we have seen, has got different sets of issues in the context of living with a child with autism. And preparing for the future. This is something which is, cannot be underemphasized, because very often we are so focused on dealing with the here and now of the child कि हम भूल जाते हैं कि एक दिन ये बच्चा बड़ा हो जाएगा, ये एक एडल्ट बनेगा, इस बच्चे को एक एडल्ट बन के रहना है. क्योंकि ऑटिज्म में you find that children, that individuals with autism have a normal lifespan. So they are going to live, and most cases they are going to outlive their parents. Okay, so it is very important for parents to plan ahead कि आगे जाके हम इस बच्चे को आत्मनिर्भर कैसे बनेंगे. अब आत्मनिर्भर के सेंस में भी हम ये नहीं कह रहे कि आप उसको डॉक्टर बनाओगे, इंजीनियर बनाओगे, वो भी बन सकते हैं, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. लेकिन जो बेसिक सेल्फ केयर फंक्शंस होते हैं, वो क्या अपनी रक्षा करेगा, अपनी मतलब सेल्फ केयर नीड्स का ये कर सकेगा, सेटिस्फाई कर सकेगा. कैन ही कुक फॉर हिमसेल्फ, कैन ही शॉप फॉर हिमसेल्फ, कैन ही लुक आफ्टर हिमसेल्फ, कैन ही मेंटेन हिज हाउस. And also other issues like sexual issues, issues of companionship, which in itself would constitute, I think, a whole 2-hour program. So I don't think we shall go into that right now. So family therapy and counseling is a very, very important component of dealing with families and helping them to accept the child and learn to go ahead with the child.
We You well said. So, family therapy and counseling. Basically, it's a need to provide the parents with their success stories, the developmental activities, and basically preparing the child for the future. It's not that your child should crack the IIT exam, as Dr. Shubhangi Vaidya said. You can have a simple satisfaction in simple activities where your child is going to shop to buy something, or whether he's able to cook for himself, he's able to bathe, and he's able to carry on the daily living activities. You can have a simple satisfaction that also, because the main sole purpose is to make that child independent. Because as ma'am said, that autistic children, they have a normal lifespan, and they can outlive their parents. So they have to lead a normal independent life of their own, carrying on their daily activities independently. So the parents can, apart from having a pressure of bearing a child with autism, they can have a simple plain satisfaction in seeing their child performing the daily living activities independently. So progressing further,
let's move on to some important other support mechanisms that we can talk about. Respite care and other alternatives. Now, respite care recently has become the subject of much discussion, giving the regular caregiver, in this case usually the mother or any other family member, a break from the constant caregiving activities that he or she is performing. Foster care, when families cannot care for the child. And the concept of group homes or assisted livings. Now, we may emphasize that these are actually Western models that can be carefully adapted to Indian needs. Basically, when we talk about what for the future, it's very important to realize that in a future where the parents may not be available to be with the child on a day-to-day basis, you have to have other alternatives in place. And group homes or assisted livings as they exist in the West, the whole concept of, group of families coming together, making living arrangements for the children, so that, even should any of the parents pass away, you find that there are other families who will still be there to keep a watchful eye on the child. So this is a very important kind of alternative living model which is in place in the West, and we have to think about it now in the Indian context as well. It's very important. And the earlier point that I had mentioned, respite care. Now, the training programs that that those out there listening to this program are taking up. Basically, you are learning how to deal with the educational and rehabilitative issues of children with autism spectrum disorder and other difficulties also. An important aspect that you need to focus on is how to support families by providing respite care. Because there are limits to the patience, there are limits to the stamina of the regular caregiver. And by ensuring certain kinds of programs or certain kinds of personnel who can actually provide care for the child, when the mother has just gone out shopping, or the mother has just gone out for a break with her friends, or any activity which is going to release the tension on the primary caregiver so that he or she can come back and do a better job with enthusiasm, sustain their energy, sustain their enthusiasm. Respite care is a very, very important aspect, and training of caregivers who can give respite care is a very important aspect, I feel, of supporting families. And the issue of foster care. Now, in the West, we find that parents who are not in a position or don't want to look after their children with disabilities often surrender the child to foster parents, and this whole scheme is administered by, through a welfare agency or through the state, wherein foster parents willingly take in the child, look after the children, and they are paid a certain stipend. Now, this is something that, in the light of the fact that so many parents in the Indian context are so poor and so ill-serviced, so far away from, have no access to facilities, this could provide a very, very, a viable alternative for parents whereby they can give up their children for fostering. And you would have foster parents who actually receive a remuneration to do so. But at the same time, I may add, this has to be administered with a great deal of care, because this should not be an excuse for, rackets in children. This should not be an excuse for parents to just, abandon their children. But we find that in the absence of such a system also, parents who don't want to look after their children just leave the child, just abandon the child. You have literally lakhs of abandoned children begging by the roadside, abandoned at railway stations, children abandoned at hospitals. This is a very, very terrible sort of human rights issue, which needs to be taken up by the state and by society and by anyone with a conscience. Because abandoning babies is something which we just live with this fact. And it is something that must be dealt with right from the source.
As you have mentioned, these three models, the respite care, foster care, and the group homes. Which kind of these three models are being followed in India?
Well, in India, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think any of these models are followed as a matter of policy. We find that in India, it's good that you raised this question, that much of the care with regard to people with disabilities, particularly autism, is usually done by non-governmental organizations. Although in this context, it's very important to mention the very, very important work done by the National Trust. The National Trust for the Welfare of Persons with Autism, Cerebral Palsy, Mental Retardation and Multiple Disabilities. And we'll come to it in a minute. And I've also just today itself listed down some of the innovative schemes that the National Trust is offering. In fact, if I can just share with you, I just saw on their website today that the National Trust is planning a scheme for group homes, for encouraging NGOs to start group homes. And it is called Gharonda. Yeah, this is it. Gharonda, which is a new scheme for providing lifelong shelter in group homes, which the National Trust is taking up. But more details about this, I suppose, can be available by the National Trust itself. Right?
Right.
Let's move on to another equally important issue. That this is basically an adulthood issue. We've discussed that children with autism grow up into adults with autism. And here we are going to speak about vocational issues. The need for the person with autism spectrum disorder to become a fully contributing member of society. The importance to impart pre-vocational skills, life skills, and functional literacy. Sheltered workshops, supported or competitive work environments, and involving industry and the service sector. Now, in this context, what I would like to say is that autism, as we've discussed, is a spectrum disorder. There are many children on the autism spectrum who are islands of great ability. Okay, you find that many of them have islands of tremendous ability in maths, in computer sciences, and these abilities are in many ways, far superior to their other abilities. So socially, a child may be very backward, but in terms of, maybe his mathematical ability or her painting ability or, other kinds of islands of ability, as we call them, they may be extremely, they may in fact overperform. Very often we find that in children, parents of children with high functioning autism, which is a kind of a subtype of autism, parents of children with high functioning autism believe that their children really do not need the kinds of remedial teaching, or they do not really need to develop the kinds of functional and life skills training that other so-called low functioning children may be receiving.
Right.
So very often you find that parents in fact insist, my child is so capable, my child is so intelligent, why can he or she not be taught advanced mathematics? Why can't he or she only be, why can't we only focus on these, skill areas? Of course, at this juncture, it's very important to note that while it is wonderful if your child can do advanced mathematics, what use is doing advanced mathematics if he or she can't go to the shop and buy a loaf of bread?
Right.
So these are very, very critical issues in developing life skills, developing work skills. And developing work skills is something that any educational program can initiate at a very early age. How to develop those basic skills that are going to be of use to the child in the workplace. Because most children with autism are usually not going to be, doing advanced physics, or not going to be doing their PhD, or not going to be, doing advanced mathematics. They're usually, like the general population, there are some people who may have exceptional skills, and the majority of people don't have exceptional skills. And the same is absolutely the case with autism as well. Now, the majority of children with autism need to have those skills put in place, which are going to enable them to negotiate with life on a day-to-day basis, and which are going to enable them to take up employment in the future. Now, the employment options, we find that they can be working in a sheltered workshop, or workshops which are exclusively for children or persons with disability, where they work under a good deal of supervision, where their special needs are taken into account, and where they are paid a stipend for the goods that they produce or the work that they do. Or it could be situations of competitive environments where they actually compete with others to get jobs or to enter the workforce. And once again, I'd like to emphasize that people with autism, it is found in the workplace, tend to be very methodical, very rule-abiding, very law-abiding workers, because they are great fans of rhythm, they are, and of routine. For them, their routine is absolutely sacrosanct. And so therefore, a worker who at the workplace is going to, very, very scrupulously adhere to routine, that person is a great asset in an organization. You won't have out-of-turn coffee breaks and other kinds of, slacking off at the office that you very often see with so-called normal people. So very often you find that autistic employees tend to be an asset, not a liability. And involving industry and the service sector is of great importance. We find that just like you have audits, of financial audits, you also need to have in place social audits. You also need to know what is it that industry is contributing to the social sector. What is it contributing back to the society from which it is gaining so much. So most, modern industries also have a very strong social agenda, and it is these social agendas which need to be explored. People need to sit down, discuss in detail, find out exactly how it is that people with autism can contribute to the functioning of various industries or service sectors and so on. In this connection, there's a very interesting piece of information I'd like to share. There is a parent from Finland, I believe, Thorkel Sone, his name is, and he is the parent of a child of a grown-up man now who's got autism, and he has started an IT company, Specialistern, which only employs persons from the autism spectrum. He is an IT specialist himself, but due to his son's difficulty and finding some kind of employment for his son, he started a company which is actually doing IT-enabled various activities. I don't know exactly the details about what is it that they do, but he has only autistic employees, and it is found that there are certain companies which are very eager to give them work because they know that timelines are always met. These people usually adhere to timelines and work is done as per schedule. So this was a very interesting initiative started by a parent of a child with autism or a person with autism.
But as you discussed about the pre-vocational skills, so how can we guide a parent in identifying what suitable vocation is applicable for the child? How can we have that?
That's a very interesting question. You find that children may show interests in various kinds of skill areas, and it is up to the parents and the educators to devise an IEP or an individualized educational plan which takes into account the child's skills, the child's interest, and also with a view to how these skills can be utilized in the future. Like I mentioned to you, I'm not an expert in special education, so this is something that would be best addressed by an education expert as to exactly how children are to be, how education is to be imparted in order to enable a child to excel or to do his or her best in whatever area he or she chooses. Now, this is really a very important thing that I would like to talk about in terms of providing support to families of children with autism, and that is the role of community-based rehabilitation, or CBR. CBR philosophy basically is rooted in the fact that disability is not just a medical issue, it is also a developmental issue. Rehabilitation in CBR, or in community-based rehabilitation, is carried out within the community, involving all the stakeholders. It includes inclusion, advocacy, information, and awareness. CBR attempts to ensure that access to resources is obtained by those who need them, and also it encourages the growth of self-help groups and community-based organizations. What are the advantages of CBR in the context of providing support to families with autistic children? Firstly, through CBR initiatives, we can help spread autism awareness in the community. We can help to facilitate early detection and intervention. And this is very important. Through CBR, there can be linkages with government programs like the ICDS. It can lead to awareness and therefore inclusion in schools which have so far refused to admit children with autism. CBR, since it works within family settings a great deal, can also strengthen families and help them to work with the child. And this is very important, it can help to reduce social isolation of the family, and through self-help groups enable families to get involved in the day-to-day activities of their child and in fostering acceptance of their child.
As we have said, Would you like to explain these points?
No, is that there's any thing you'd like to ask me about these points? Please go ahead.
As we discussed about the integrated education or the inclusion thing, do you have any schools in like Delhi or in India which like admitting the children with autism?
Definitely, there are several schools which are admitting children with autism.
The mainstream schools.
Mainstream schools. There are mainstream schools which have got special wings. There are mainstream schools in which children with autism are admitted as part of the mainstream classroom. And there are also mainstream schools which also come with special schools. You know, they have a mainstream school and they have a special school attached to them. No doubt these schools are very much there, but once again we find that in the case of children with autism, children who are on the upper end of the spectrum or the more able end of the spectrum usually tend to get school placements. Okay. Children who have more serious difficulties are usually considered unteachable, or schools don't want to take them. Also, children who may have certain very difficult behaviors, usually they are not welcomed into either inclusive or even in many cases special school settings. You would be amazed to know that many children with severe symptoms don't even get admitted into special schools, because there are just a handful of autism specific special schools in the whole of the country. I don't think there are more than 50 to 60 autism exclusive schools in India as such. And within mixed disabilities special schools, children who have got very, very difficult symptoms or who have autism and difficult behaviors are rarely welcome. I mean, very often they are just rejected straight away. Whenever the autism diagnosis is seen, they're straight away sent off, because educators don't have the expertise to deal with autism. And also the great deal of misconception about the fact that people with autism are unteachable. People with autism are violent. These are very, very typical responses that you encounter when you talk about people with autism. People with autism are hyperactive. अरे ये बच्चा तो बैठेगा नहीं, ये तो भाग जाएगा, इसको हम क्या सिखाएंगे? This is something we often get to hear. ये बच्चा तो बहुत दूसरे बच्चों को मारेगा, ये तो पिंच करेगा, ये तो ये करेगा, वो करेगा, हम इसको नहीं रख सकते हैं क्योंकि ये पूरे क्लासरूम को डिसरप्ट करेगा. So there is a lot of misconception or a lot of prejudice about the disruptive or the negative kind of aspects of autism, and therefore ये बच्चे तो कुछ सीख नहीं सकते, ये कुछ समझ नहीं सकते, and therefore हम इनको अपने स्कूल में लेके क्या करेंगे, बल्कि दूसरे बच्चे और खराब हो जाएंगे इनके साथ बैठ के. जो बच्चे अच्छा सीख रहे हैं वो भी उनकी आदतें सीखेंगे. These are the very, very standard kinds of understandings of autism, जो कि न सिर्फ हम रेगुलर स्कूल्स में देखते हैं, बट स्पेशल स्कूल्स में भी इस तरह की मानसिकता होती है.
So we have to guide the families to deal with the pressure and the burden.
Exactly, guide the families, and I'm glad you've raised this point, because you have to guide families to advocate for their child. ये अक्सर हम देखते हैं कि जो पेरेंट्स अपने बच्चे के लिए एक स्कूल में प्लेसमेंट ढूंढते हैं, उनको लिटरली उन स्कूल्स को कन्विंस करना पड़ता है, उन स्कूल्स को एजुकेट करना पड़ता है कि हमारा बच्चा क्या कर सकता है, आप हमारे बच्चे के लिए क्या कर सकते हैं, है ना. तो इट्स नॉट जस्ट दैट हमने स्कूल में बच्चे को भर्ती किया और बात खत्म हो गई, बस वो बच्चा पढ़ेगा और आवर प्रॉब्लम इज सॉल्व्ड. कई बार प्रॉब्लम स्कूल के एडमिशन के साथ ही शुरू होती है, क्योंकि हम देखते हैं कि स्कूल सेटिंग में भी यू नीड हाईली मोटिवेटेड, हाईली ट्रेन्ड एंड हाईली एम्पैथेटिक टीचर्स. अब वो कहाँ मिलेंगी आप?
राइट.
So the emphasis on training teachers, which is why I'm so glad that there are teachers out there who are training to become special educators, and these are really going to be the committed vanguard of personnel who are going to help families and help children with autism to access the basic rights that every child has, and that is to an appropriate education.
I think one more question has been left unanswered. Like we have discussed like pediatrician are the first persons to which the parents go in having a diagnosis regarding an autistic child, but they often misdiagnose the child. So who are the right professionals, the personals who deal with diagnosis aspect? Where should the parents go?
Well, actually a clinical diagnosis can be given only by a trained pediatrician or a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist. Okay. We also have departments of psychology, departments of psychiatry in hospitals which can give diagnosis. And also we find increasingly that because autism is such a neglected area, you find that in many NGOs who are actually doing hardcore grassroots work with people with autism, they are very often in a better position to actually guide parents as to what the issues with the child are and how they can go ahead. But the important thing to stress here is that it is really the developmental pediatrician or even the general practitioner, the general physician who the child sees, who has to be sensitized to the need to spot the symptoms of autism. This fact cannot be overemphasized.
Okay. Shall we go ahead with the CPR?
Yeah, sure. And this is also one of the important aspects regarding giving support to families of children with autism, the role of civil society and state initiatives. And as we've been indicating throughout our discussion, there has been an immense growth of NGOs in the disability sector. We find that it is the NGO activism which resulted in autism being recognized as a disability in 1999. And the National Trust Act for the Welfare of Persons with Autism, Cerebral Palsy, Mental Retardation and Multiple Disabilities was promulgated in 1999, wherein for the first time autism was actually recognized as a disability in its own right. And family-led NGOs and various other disability organizations have been lobbying for a very, very long time for inclusion of autism in the Persons with Disability Act of 1995. Now, as our audience would probably know, the PWD Act of 1995 is the core benchmark legislation pertaining to disability in India. And autism, unfortunately, is not included in the PWD Act as yet. However, in 1999, the National Trust Act was promulgated, keeping in mind that persons with certain categories of disabilities have got certain special needs, which probably would not be addressed by the other disability legislations in place. And these needs basically refer to lifelong care, the issue of guardianship, what happens when the parents are gone. And we find that one of the important mandates of the National Trust Act is, it has evolved a mechanism for appointing legal guardians, and not just appointing legal guardians, but also monitoring the guardianship that is performed by these legal guardians. So not just has the National Trust evolved this mechanism, but it can also ensure that children or persons who are under guardianship are not neglected, they are getting what is due to them, they are being properly looked after. And also, guardians who are defaulting or guardians who are neglecting their wards or who are mistreating them can be divested of the guardianship of that person. So this is a very important legal safeguard that the National Trust has brought into place. The National Trust also has several innovative schemes that it has launched, including a very important one, that is Nirmay, the medical insurance scheme. Very often we find that persons with disabilities, their health becomes a very residual sort of concern. Nobody really bothers about their health. Nobody really bothers that they're getting a good quality of life. So therefore this health scheme, this insurance scheme, which enables them to avail of health facilities and health care up to rupees 1 lakh, is a very important scheme that has been launched by Nirmay, and I urge all parents of children with autism, whoever may be watching it, to enroll for this scheme, because it will also help to register your numbers with the government. People need to know how many people with autism there are out there. The Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan that I had mentioned earlier, this is also an extremely important flagship scheme of the Government of India. We'll not go into too much detail because this would, it could take up an entire program discussing what the SSA is doing. Also at this stage, and this is particularly for the audience out there, RCI approved training programs to prepare a cadre of committed and trained personnel. That's all of you out there, who are listening to us as we are on air right now, and a very, very important initiative, because unless you have trained personnel, how can, where are parents going to go, where are families going to go? Right? And partnerships between NGOs and government agencies, this is also very, very important. Like we mentioned earlier, it's the lobbying of NGOs, or the lobbying of parent-driven NGOs that actually woke the government up to the fact that there is this disability called autism, and it needs to be recognized, it needs to be accounted for, it needs to be included as part of our national agenda.
Like, as you have mentioned the National Trust Act, I would like to ask a question here. Like the NHTC, which provide the loans for the employment thing, does it also include autism?
I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about that. That is something you will need to check from either the National Trust or from the agency concerned. Okay. So there are other schemes of the National Trust that includes the Gyan Prabha, the Udyam Prabha. These are schemes to provide funding for higher education. We'd mentioned the scheme Gharonda, which is a new scheme for providing lifelong shelter and group homes. There's Sahyogi, which is a new and a revamped scheme of training caregivers and deployment of caregivers. And the whole concept of Samarth, which is a center-based scheme which was introduced in July 2005 for short-term and long-term residential services. And the activities in a Samarth center, to be recognized as a Samarth center, activities include intervention, special education, integration, schooling, open schooling, pre-vocational, vocational training, etc. So the National Trust has, in its short span of time, brought into play a number of very, very innovative and important schemes for the benefit of persons with disabilities. Another interesting thing I saw was Aspiration, which is an early intervention program to train children between the age groups of 0 to 6 years for school readiness. And all this is actually in tune really with, the commitment. We have to say this, that for a developing country, we have shown immense commitment at the level of policy and at the level of, our national goals towards the welfare of persons with disability. I mean, it's a matter of great pride that India was one of the first countries to ratify the UN Convention on the Rights for Persons with Disability in 2007. And this is something that every Indian can be justifiably very proud of. However, we see that the fit between actually policy planning and what the agendas, the welfare agendas of the government are, and actually they're percolating down to the grassroots. There is a big gap in that, and this is where committed NGOs in partnership with government agencies can really do a great deal. I'd like to sort of bring a wrap to our discussion today by really outlining what I think are some of the important things that we have to do, a way forward, what is to be our agenda for the future. I think working for an inclusive and plural society where all differences are valued and given their space, where human rights and entitlements of all citizens, irrespective of their abilities, are respected, while focusing rehabilitation efforts on the whole family, not just on the affected individual, and revitalizing our traditions of communitarian care and interdependence. I think there are many things to learn from the West, there are many things to learn about how disability has been handled, but there are many things that we can that we need to caution ourselves. You're familiar with the fact that for over a century, the way disabled people were dealt with in Western society was by incarcerating them, locking them up in institutions, taking them away from their families. And now we find that in the last 50 years or so, institutionalization as a strategy for dealing with people with disability is being reversed. Over there, they're waking up to the fact that it is actually within community settings, within the family, that a person with disabilities can really benefit and lead a full and rich life. And so institutionalization is being reversed. But in societies like India, you've always had a tradition of family care. The old, the sick, the destitute have always been sheltered or nurtured by a family system. And we find that today we are at a curious flux in the history of our society where the very systems which gave a great deal of security and nurture to individuals who are weak, who are sick, who are old, these very systems are now, coming, modernization and change is eroding these systems, and at the same time, no alternatives really have emerged in a very strong way to deal with them. So this is really, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that, modernization is bad, industrialization is terrible. Please remember that it is these very processes that have, in fact, increased our knowledge about disability, increased our appreciation about, issues, that disability entails. What I'm arguing is that we need, while respecting the differences of individuals, while respecting the knowledge that the West has to offer us, at the same time, our own traditions of caring for those who are weak, they must also be strengthened. They must not be lost sight of. Increasingly, we find individualism, I am the most important person, everyone else comes after me. My goals, my ambitions, my projects, these are more important than anything else. This kind of me orientation, this kind of extremely self-centered kind of achievement orientation, this needs to be tempered with a concern for those who are weaker than me, those who need my help, those who need my support. And support, remember, is never a one-sided thing. I may think that today it is a person with disability who needs my support. Remember, tomorrow I will be old. I will have various kinds of disabilities myself, because aging and the aging body, you're not going to remain young, and you're not going to remain active forever, right? Illness, decline, disability, deterioration, these are life situations which all of us are facing, and therefore the interdependence of all human beings is really something that we're looking at. It's not that I'm strong, so therefore I'm going to give charity to the weak. It's that a person who may be weak also has the capacity to support me in various ways, and that is what we have to look at.
Very well said. So the crux of today's discussion, let me discuss over that. Basically, what is autism? It's a neurodevelopmental disorder pertaining to the problems in language, communication and social skill areas, with the odd behaviors as well as the sensory issues. We said it is a autism spectrum disorder. Why we say it is a spectrum? Because there's a variability of symptoms. That's why it is termed or coined as autism spectrum disorder. Usually the ASD or the autism spectrum disorder is often misdiagnosed or it is left undiagnosed because of the lack of the information and awareness among the professionals, among the teachers and among the parents or among the family members. And if we talk on the impact onto the family members, which is our today's discussion topic, then we can say the mother, she is the primary caregiver. She has to play the multiple roles of that of a caretaker or a playmate, and there are overwhelming responsibilities, and she's very burdened with the responsibilities she has to perform for the child or she has to perform for the family. And because of that, apart from that, the maternal blame from the family, from the extended family, goes to on her, that because of you the child is born autistic, and because of you the child is having this kind of condition, the autism. And if we talk about the father, the impact on the father, then we can say usually he has to earn the bread and butter for the family. So usually because of this, there is loss of connectivity between him and the child or between him and his wife. And if we talk about the siblings, then we can say they have to play the role of the surrogate parents. And especially that in the case of a male child, if a normal male child is there and having an autistic sibling, then all the pressure goes on him that after the parents, he has to take care of his autistic child. And there are overburdened conditions on him or her. So we can say that there is loss of peer groups, so there are not enough peer groups or the counselor groups for the siblings. And if we talk on the impact on the grandparents, then they can be on the two sides of the spectrum. Either they are very supportive, not just the extended families or the in-laws, but the parents from the maternal side, the parents of the mother. They can be very supportive. Or we can say if the extended family members, then there is a generation gap there, and usually the maternal blame or the blame thing goes on to the mother. So if the parents are very supportive or the extended family is very supportive, that will have a very fruitful result in bearing the child having an autism spectrum disorder. And if we talk that there is a change in the existence of the family structure because of the modernization, because of the industrialization, the parents having the autistic children, they are usually moving to metropolitan cities in search of a better educational aspect and in search of a better medical aspect. So usually the joint family structure is then broken down to the nuclear family structure, and the burden which is being initially divided among the different family members, whole soul comes onto the parents or either onto the mother or to the father, we can say that. And if we talk about the disability and the stigma, then we can say usually it has been thought that disability is due to the theory of the karmas. Because of your past deeds, the child is being born the disabled. And today, the parents, they're usually very comfortable in talking their child's disability with the social groups or with their friends, but not with them, with their extended families. And the role of the teachers has to play a very good part in this. We have to sensitize the teachers, and we have to make them aware about the integrated aspects and the inclusive aspects. Plus, we can follow the CBR approach, the success stories, the developmental activities, and preparing the child for the future. Apart from having the different schemes from the National Trust Act, which ma'am has discussed, and the role of NGOs also play a very important part. So that's all for today's session. But before that, I would like to thank Dr. Shubhangi Vedda for coming over here and discussing with this topic. And thank you viewers for maintaining with us. Thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.